Hi there. Let me tell you what an infection is. And do you know when you have an infection? Stay and I'll tell you in a few minutes what we understand currently. All the best, it's Brian here, Dr. Brian. We're talking today about infection. It's very much in the news. We probably all know more about infection, or we're hearing it talked about a lot more than normal. And we're now we're interested or understand or hear phrases like viral load. What does that mean? Is it significant? And in the current environment where we're being tested for the presence of some microbes, and we're talking some fragments of RNA here, we're tested for them, and the presence of that is supposed to indicate that we now have an infection. And that actually is probably not totally correct in terms of how physiology works with our understanding to date. So what's an infection and how would you get it and how would you know? So an infection means that a microorganism, so usually a bacteria, could be a fungus, could be a protozoa, could be some other small organism, or what's called a virus, which is basically some bits of DNA, sort of bits of alphabet that make up DNA strands, so some fragments, and they're a little protein capsule. So our body produces these every day. They're called exosomes. They're excess bits of DNA and RNA that your body packages up into a little cylinder. We all know what a virus looks like now. And then they are ejected by the cell, and then they come out. We either breathe them out, they're in saliva, they're in urine, they're in feces. So they come out of the body. They're actually waste, like rubbish day on Monday night, Tuesday morning, where I live. And so this current worldwide infection has different strains. That's been acknowledged because viruses do mutate very quickly if in the way that they are supposed to. We take them in, they hijack our cells, they can't live on their own. They have no life force, they have no maintenance. When someone says a virus can survive on a surface, what they mean is the protein capsule hasn't broken down yet. But it actually isn't alive. A virus is never alive because all it does is get into your body, get inside one of your cells and hijack some of the cell operation, replicate itself, and that produces so rapidly, so quickly, your cell explodes and all the bits of new virus capsule pieces go out and infect the rest of your body. So there's definitely something going on. So if you just have one or two fragments which are so tiny they have to be amplified 45 times to be able to be seen in a test, it's a lot, 45 times, then those one or two fragments are incidental. It's a wee bit like saying there was a lot of traffic on the road. It doesn't mean there was an accident. And so you probably can't give that to anybody, and if you could, it's really like giving someone one piece of a puzzle and they can't do anything with it. But if you were very symptomatic, then you'd actually give someone the whole jigsaw and they could make a picture out of it. But if you just give them one piece of a jigsaw, it's not particularly useful. So we might be mistakenly doing more around preventing giving something or nothing to someone than was truly necessary physiologically. So I'm just going to sort of go sideways and forward. So the concept is that we have the body is always on the lookout for things that will make us sick. Survival's everything. the immune system, when it's working well, is really clever, and it's looking at everything, and it's sifting from wanted and unwanted. So we've heard about the biome and we've heard about the virome. So we have maybe 100 times more viruses, a few thousand times, millions of bacteria that are essential for our survival. If the viruses and bacteria left our bodies, we would die. They are essential for our survival. So the idea that a few might make us sick is a bit like saying, well, we have to kill everybody in the world because there are some bad people. That's really a silly idea. So some people might think it's a good idea, but let's just say that such a concept is flawed. So the body is always on the lookout for things that it's actually recognized from previous experience are not good for us, and it will create short and long-term memory in terms of antibodies or T cells, killer cells, helper cells, etc. And that level of T cells, helper cells, killer cells, the other immunoglobulin A, G, they are part of the sort of immediate and follow-up immune defense. So you could often come into contact, we all every day come into contact with bacteria and viruses that are harmful, but they arrive one or two at a time, and our body will very happily just do a very quiet, behind the curtain dispatch operation on those bugs, and we will not know for 1 second that our body's done anything. It might be a slightly higher load, and you might have a mild temperature for a day, maybe not even that long, and that's the body creating a heat environment that usually destroys bacteria. Most bacteria that might be harmful to us are destroyed at 37, 38, 39 degrees. And at that point they can't stand the heat, so they die. And the body is raising the temperature to kill the bacteria. So managing temperature is important. If it gets too high, it can be bad for us. But if we bring it down prematurely by taking some medication to drop temperature, we arguably run the risk of prolonging the illness because we've taken out a mechanism that the body uses to fight infection. And you hear people talking about the fever broke and then I got better. And that is the point where the fever goes up, 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 and the body's mounting this last-ditch attempt to kill all the bugs, and it's successful in that, and then the body immediately drops the temperature because it doesn't need it anymore, and it's not good for us long-term to be heated. So one of my personal remedies, if I discover if I've got a cold or I'm not feeling well, is I go to bed and I wear several layers. I wear a beanie, and I may take some things that would help to heat me up internally. So I might have an alcoholic drink like a scotch or something that would be warming. But I'll take garlic and I'll use a number of other things that we know have a long history of being beneficial. So we're supporting the body on two levels. We're giving the body some help to run its immune system defense, and we're taking in some things that are well established to actually be antimicrobial. So they're usually not specific like an antibiotic, they're more broadly antimicrobial. So they pick up all things that are unwelcome in the body. So an infection is the concept of something that is in the body that is actually causing potential damage. Now, obviously there's two ways that an infection can get in. It can get in through the nose and the mouth, so basically in through those openings, and that will get into the bloodstream and potentially get into the body. Now, if you breathe it in or if it's in it'll get into the nose and sinus area and create some irritation there. if you swallow it, most bugs won't survive the acid in the stomach. The hydrochloric acid is pretty severe and that will kill them. So that is a first line of defense for something ingested. So the idea of drinking a lot, if you've got a runny nose and you feel congested in the nose and throat, is actually helping to flush an amount of the bacteria or viruses into your stomach where the stomach acid will kill them. So keep that in mind, because that's a good preventative, and we know that one of the things that we say to do is stay warm and keep up your liquids, because that will help the body to actually flush out of the nose and throat and swallow it into the stomach where the stomach acid will do its job. The other way you can get infected is through a break in the skin. The intact skin is the first line of defense. So you stand on something or cut yourself. And while that wound is open to the air, some dirt or something might get in that will create a local infection. So creating some sort of covering, which could be a bandage. There's some modern technologies that are quite clever. Some of the things that were quite old that actually are quite effective are things like honey. So good quality, something like Manuka honey, a thin smear of that actually will provide a barrier without being airtight. So you'll still get air in to heal the area, but there are other things that you can apply that are topically antiseptic. Some are pharmaceuticals and some are things like essential oils and other things that your grandmother said work, and that was because over many generations they found them to be effective. So infection is quite a hot topic at the moment. There's a lot of people are very, we're all very aware of it. We're being made to be aware of it. However, know that in most cases our bodies are very capable of fighting off a bug. The only times that we might be under perfect would be that you're already stressed, so your body is busy doing something else, and in that case you're more likely to get sick. So being less stressed is good. Regular exercise boosts immunity, eating well boosts immunity, keeping your blood sugars low, so the glucose levels in your blood should be low, because we know when they're high they're pro-inflammatory and they reduce the efficacy of your immune system. So infections are an interesting area. I think what's interesting as a result of this current world event is that there's probably an increased look into how the body fights a bug and how that will fall into the general population of information over time, and we'll work out that on average most of us who are fundamentally healthy, we come into contact with a bug, we're rarely sick, and we don't pass it on, because if you only have a very light dose of something, your body has actually managed it before you get the opportunity to hand it on. And if everybody in the population is quite healthy, basically they die out, the bugs die out, because they find it difficult to find a host they can take up lodging in and replicate enough to really survive. And the evidence would be that the concept of herd immunity might be close to 30, but certainly under 50%, not that concept of 90% that was talked about in terms of vaccine schedules to create herd immunity. It seems that for wild varieties, which are the real deal, that it might be more like 30%, and that seems to be the experience in Sweden, where they've had a minimal interruption to normal life, and they've actually stopped seeing cases turn up in hospital. Over the last few months they had a spike through to sort of maybe May, but now it's actually tapered right off, and there's kind of no second wave, because they've basically all been circulating enough, exchanged enough bugs as is normal in a healthy environment, in a healthy society, and for that reason basically it's just petered out because there's not enough people who've not been exposed to the bug, that don't have any sort of immunity, which is thought to actually, we are potentially more immune to this new bug because it comes from a class of bugs that we're quite familiar with. So it's a wee bit like, if you can read kanji, you can actually read and understand Korean, Japanese and Chinese. Now you may not be able to speak them all perfectly, but the characters are fundamentally the same. So you can kind of look at them and get the gist of what's going on. A little bit to say, you could read French if you can read, you'll understand what's going on if you can read English and you look at French, and there's enough words that cross over. So in this regard, we may actually all be much more immune to this new novel variety of virus, partly because it's part of that common cold, flu variety of viruses that have been in circulation for many thousands of years. So infections are all around us. We are the host of billions and trillions of bacteria and viruses. Our bodies are super well equipped to live with them healthily. They're necessary for our health, and it could be an interesting concept. What we call an infection might actually have some other purpose. There's a very interesting discussion I want to research and talk about later, which is, are viruses part of minute-by-minute genetic adaptation? Because classic genetic adaptation takes so long, generations, that if there's a sharp change in environment, we need an instant patch we can put into the genetic code to help us survive. And that's a really interesting idea to discuss some further, because the concept of trying never to get sick might mean that we don't survive as healthily in the longer term because we haven't had that little upgrade patch that was available in that virus that got passed around the community that helps us to survive. So there's an interesting thought for later, because that's quite counter to the current narrative. Okay, I'm going to wish you well and catch up with me soon. Like and subscribe, that's the common thing to say. But if this is interesting, you will probably save it into your liked, and you'll click the subscribe button because you'd like to hear when there's a new video clip out. And if you hit the little subscription bell, then the YouTube will tell you when there's a new thing up for you to have a look at. So I hope you've enjoyed that today. I hope it's filled in a few knowledge gaps for you, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Remember, healthy people don't get sick, and super healthy people always survive and thrive. All the best.